had a lot of discussion this morning about the skills gap, why it's arisen, possibly what we might do about it from various perspectives in terms of, social equity, in terms of efficiency. But tell me something about Siemens and what it is doing about that, because if there was one company, as I know from writing about it, indeed living in Germany, which has really put itself at the forefront of redesigning the idea of apprenticeships and addressing the skills gap up front, it must be yours. Different context here in the States. How do you go about that?
Well, you know, we're a large manufacturing company. We've got 55,000 employees here. We've been building quite a few new plants the last few years in Iowa and Kansas and California and in Charlotte, North Carolina. And one of the things we found in some of these large plants, like the one in Charlotte, where we needed 1,200 new workers, we really struggled to find people that had the skills for modern advanced manufacturing. In fact, down at Charlotte, we interviewed thousands of people. Only 10% of them were qualified for what we call pre-training. In other words, they could pass kind of the remedial tests in mathematics and reading and things like that. And then once we got them into pre-training, only a small number of those people actually qualified to work in the plant. So we had to have a training program to open the plant in North Carolina for about a year, just to train about 1,500 people to be able to work in advanced manufacturing, where everything is run by a computer or a laser or a robot. People are as likely to have an iPad on the floor. There's computer screens all over. It's not the old dirty jobs of manufacturing and things like that. So, and we've seen that across the country. And when you open one of these plants, you're basically looking at an area about 50 miles around it to get the workers from. So we actually decided we were going to set up a German-style apprentice program there, adapted to the U.S. So we worked with a local community college. We set up we helped them develop the curriculum. We actually sent the professors over to the Berlin Technical Academy to be trained on how to teach it, a course in mechatronics, which is a training course for production workers in an advanced manufacturing setting. So it's got some mechanical, some electrical, some math, some software engineering, et cetera. And we set up an apprentice program where we've got a couple dozen people going through it because we figured we needed an ongoing pipeline. We recruit high school students out of that, which was very difficult here in the U.S. Because, you know, the old vocational track has a bad vibe here in the U.S. So it took quite a bit of effort to convince parents and even administrators in high schools that this was a good career track, at least to start your career on. But we've gotten over that. We've gotten that. And we're not pulling people from the bottom of their high school class. We're pulling people from the top of their high school class. And anyway, they go into the program. They go to school part-time. They work part-time. We pay them the whole time. And when they come out of that, they end up with a job that pays about $55,000 after 3 years, which, by the way, the average job for a liberal arts graduate in this country with a 4-year liberal arts degree is under $40,000. So it's, I think, a very good value proposition because you have a certificate, you have a real skill, not just a degree. You do have a degree from a community college. You have a job, and you have no debt because we've been paying you for 3 years, as opposed to the average college grad, which on average has $25,000 to $30,000 in debt. So I think one of the you know, and we have this going on. We're now setting up a bunch of these around the country, and I was on the President's Council for Advanced Manufacturing, and I help lead the workforce piece of that, and now we're going to be rolling out more of these kind of apprentice programs. So.
When I donned my very flattering blue overalls and went to look at and take part briefly in your apprentice program in Berlin, something a lot of people then said to me afterwards, even at the high end of German manufacturing, but also back in Britain, was, well, this is a kind of okay for Siemens. You know, there's a kind of history of this, there's a commitment to it. It may not, purely on the balance sheet, make the company money, but it's something that Siemens does well. The suggestion was, this is great, but how could we possibly scale or emulate it? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think the scaling is kind of the big issue, and I think what we've been doing, for example, since we've set up that program in Charlotte, we now have 7 or 8 other companies who have joined in and are a part of that program. So I think, you know, it's the old, once you build it, they will come. So we have a good example. And there are other companies, not just German companies, but other companies in the country who have apprentice programs. But I think there's a couple things that we're going to need to do here. We need to, you know, these kind of programs have a real image problem. So we're going to need to understand how to better market these programs to parents and administrators and things like that, right? We also need to think of funding. In Germany, the actual training part of it and the curriculum development and any materials that are needed or equipment are actually funded by the federal and the state governments in Germany. So essentially the companies pay for the time they're working for you, which is a good value proposition for companies. Here, we footed the whole bill in Charlotte, and it ends up costing $150,000 to $160,000 per apprentice for the 3+ years until they get a degree. Now, granted, 2/3 of that is the salary you're paying them to work. Yes. Right, and that increases over time. But the bottom line is it's still very expensive for a lot of people to look at. So we're hoping that on the Advanced Manufacturing Council of the President, this new Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that just came out, which is going to be more focused on demand-driven jobs, is going to have an opportunity to put money against these kind of programs locally. I think, already most U.S. companies, I'm on the Business Roundtable, and I also head the Workforce Committee for the Business Roundtable, which is 250 of the largest companies in the country. And companies already spend a tremendous amount of money giving to various programs from K through 12 indeed. And also to workforce programs. And the problem is there aren't a lot of results. They're not getting the kind of metrics.
Well, I'm so pleased you mentioned that, because it's not as if we suddenly woke up and thought, my gosh, we must suddenly start an apprentice scheme. I mean, this thinking about it, worrying about it has been going on now for many decades. So you've seen, as you started out by saying, you just found you couldn't get applicants for a kind of advanced industrial model. Where has this disconnect come from in the education system, and do you have any criticisms there, or it might be constructive?
Well, I think part of it is the world is couple things. The world is changing very fast. The technology is changing very fast. If you take a look at manufacturing today, it's all software-led. It's all becoming digital very quickly. If you take a look at, I think the number of high schools in this country who teach any kind of computer science, computer engineering, software engineering is less than 15%. And the number of students actually going through college, this is 2014, who go through college, who have any IT while they're in college, is minuscule, right? It's maybe less than 20%. In an age when everything we make, we make at Siemens has software associated with it, sensors, everything is becoming digital, and very few people coming out of school today have any awareness of how all of that works, right? And so you talk about a basic gap. This is as basic as, as having some math skills, having good reading skills, being able to speak, et cetera. Those things are all important, but you also need to have a basic understanding of how the business world works today, right?
I would say, just talking to a lot of K-12 educators, that there is a bit of a sort of confusion in their minds about whether employers have been broadly saying to them, you don't give us maths and literacy skills. So the whole kind of focus really of the developed world in education moved to that, particularly since the PISA results were not particularly good for America, they were particularly good for the UK on those metrics. But you seem to be saying something else, which is that it's a lack of a kind of responsiveness to an IT-led environment. Now, like most people, and probably in many of the debates today, we've had a sort of all the good things should live together answers. But, if I were to put you on the spot and say, what do you really want more of in K-12, what would you say to me?
Well, I would say in general, we need more skills-based training so that people, and not just IT, I was using IT as an example, but engineering. I'll give you a good example. We grant, we're one of the companies that has one of the leading industrial software, Siemens PLM, that's used to design cars and rockets and golf clubs and all kinds of interesting things. In the U.S., we primarily give it to colleges and universities for their engineering departments. We're now starting to give it to community colleges. Occasionally, we can give it to a high school that can use it. Around the world, in places like China and India and over in Europe, many of the European countries, they've been using the software in high school for years, okay? Because they have programs where they're already using the software with students to develop and design things in high school, right? So we're a bit behind in some of these areas in terms of what we're pushing into the curriculum, even at the high school level. So when students come into college, they're already a bit behind their global competitors. So you take a global company like Siemens, we're working with colleges and universities all over the world, and we've got apprentice-type programs and training programs all over the world. In the U.S., this is now just becoming a new kind of thing, but the reality is a lot of the rest of the world has been pushing it for a long, long time. And one of the reasons, if you take a look at a country like Germany, Austria, I think Switzerland, some of those, the unemployment among young people is much lower, is because they do have many more people coming out with these technical skills out of high school. I think in Germany, more than half the high school students go on this technical track, this vocational track, and something like half go on a university track.
Well, that's true, but the technical track has not been without its problems in Germany. And one of the things that is, is just an interesting thing if you're looking to how you might scale up your model here, is how do you avoid a position, talking to some of your leadership team in Berlin, how do you avoid this thing where you get into a relationship with a community college or the Berufsschule in Germany, then you actually find that you're not getting what you want out of it, that the staff, the educators, if you like, are not adapting as quickly as you would like. Now, is your response then, oh, blimey, I've now got another thing to do at Siemens. I've basically got to go in and at least, if not run the community college, I have to be really engaged with it. I have to be practically sort of helping the mastermind curriculum. Is that a realistic perspective really for many big companies to do?
Well, I mean, we have people that decide after they've started in one of these apprentice programs that's not the right thing for them. I mean, what I would say to a lot of people is it's the beginning of your career. I mean, you start down a path, you start developing a skill. Maybe you decide you want to go get more education or whatever. I mean, a lot of the senior executives at Siemens started out as apprentices. People who are CEOs of businesses, CFOs of businesses, et cetera, started out as apprentices. So you develop a real skill, you have a job, you work, you can continue going to school, et cetera. So it's not, people think of it as, well, the end of your career, you're going to be working in a manufacturing plant. That's not the reality. But we do also get people who decide, hey, I don't want to go down this technical track, I want to go down another track. Well, I mean, look at what we have in the university system today. Only 59% of the people who start college in this country end up graduating, and that's in 6 years. So we have 41% of the students who don't ever graduate. And then of the ones who graduate, something like 30% of them actually end up in a career that's related to their major. So think of this value proposition. I'm a parent, I'm a student, I'm looking at going to college. So there's a 2/3 chance that this is going to be a bad bet for me. This is going to be a bad bet for me. 2/3. Now that's not 6 or 8 or 10%. 2/3 chance that this is not going to be the way I want to go. And the same thing. Now I don't know what the odds are on a technical track. There's not enough experience in this country with what it would look like. But in Germany, yes, it's had some issues like everything. But on the other hand, it's been pretty successful. And the issue is they're not pushing everyone into a 4-year program or whatever, or most of the people into it. They've got a pretty even track, right?
One of the themes that came up, I think it was in a lunchtime session just before you arrived, was a kind of sense that the 2-year track needed to be invigorated. That was, plenty of good things could come out of community colleges. In a way, community colleges just got a bit of a kind of bad rap, and that people have had another look at them. And certainly people I've spoken to about the sector saying, well, I used to be more critical, but now I've looked at what a lot of community colleges are doing, and it's really perhaps, not as inadequate as the reputation that they gained. But what would you do, from everything you've said, which is absolutely, core to have that relationship with training, with a technical advancement, what would you do with the community colleges?
Well, I think we find them a natural vehicle. We work a lot with universities and develop programs. I mean, we have programs, research and various programs ongoing with about 100 universities in the country. So we work a lot with universities. But we do work with 30 or 40 community colleges, especially around our manufacturing facilities, because they want to be able to attract people from the local community, and they want to be able to get them jobs. So they're a natural vehicle to say, hey, I'm willing to do something different with you. I'm willing to work with you to develop a curriculum, for example, for mechatronics. I'm willing to get professors trained in this area because I know it's going to lead to jobs with you and also with other companies in the area.
And so you're training the teachers as well as...
In Charlotte, yes, we actually sent them over to the Berlin Technical Institute to get trained.
That strikes me as a really interesting thing that probably is not done enough, of the idea that you can simply transact directly to the workforce when a lot of them are going to come through gateways that involve teaching staff. I mean, is there a lot more potential in that model for you to actually be trainers of the teachers, or the intermediaries?
Yeah, I think there is. I think a couple of things. One is I think there's a lot of evidence out there that classroom training along with hands-on training is a good thing. It gets people more focused, and it leads to more jobs, particularly in the skilled areas, right? So I think we're working a lot on not just internships, but these co-ops, and I would say the apprenticeships at a notch up from that, because they're actually working for you on a full-time basis, and you're more committed with an apprenticeship than you are with an internship. But you know, I think, for example, less than, I don't know what the latest number is, but the last number I saw was only 25% of the colleges and universities in the country require some kind of internship, right? And there's strong evidence that shows that work-related skills married with classroom skills lead to more jobs. I mean, a higher percentage chance that you're going to get a job in the area that you want, right? And so I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to work more closely with our university and college partners, as well as the community colleges, to say, let's make sure you have the programs that fit with the jobs that we have out there, right? Yes. And it's easier to do it to community colleges because they're more flexible. And I agree. I think most of the community college presidents I talk to are trying to change their model. They're trying to be more demand-oriented, and they realize that you really have to, you know, the jobs and the skills that are required around this country vary dramatically from region to region and city to city. And that's why, for example, in the Southeast, we have a lot of manufacturing jobs coming up. They're realizing they need to have the skills for advanced manufacturing in this country, with a lot of big companies going down there. Other parts of the country, Washington, D.C. is more cybersecurity, IT kind of related jobs. They need programs around those. And I think you're seeing the community colleges adapt to that. I think the universities are as well. I think my take is the whole university system is just moving a little bit slower than it needs to in terms of developing the skills of tomorrow. Because if I take a look at a lot of the businesses we're in, they're changing much more rapidly. I mean, more than half the jobs that we'll have by 2025 don't even exist today.
Well, you anticipated my next question. Yeah. How then do we work with that? People talk about agility and being prepared for changes, but given that most things are sort of almost unimaginable until they happen, not just did they move perhaps faster than we thought, right, but that everything from wearable technology to the degree to which a manufacturing process has shifted, I'm sure, in your working life. You know, even someone who's in your position probably didn't anticipate it very long before a lot of things happened. So how do we prepare for that?
Well, one of the things we do is we don't just work with universities and colleges on internships and co-ops and apprenticeships. We spend about $1.5 billion a year in the U.S. on R&D, and we have relationships with dozens and dozens of universities. And one of the things you do when you're doing the joint research is not just the end isn't just the output of the research, but it's getting the universities to understand this is where the technology is going. This is where advanced gas turbine technology, this is where security technology is going, this is where medical technology is going. And these are the kinds of skills and criteria we're going to have in the future and the needs we're going to have in the future. And they can see that everything is becoming very networked, very digital, very, you know. And so if you work with them closely, then they say, hey, we need to start tailoring our programs to match these technologies.
Informed crystal ball gazing.
Exactly.
I think it's a great time to open up to the floor. If any of what Eric has said has brought a challenge or a question, feel free. Gentleman at the back. Oh, sorry, lady at the back. God, I wish I had my specs on. Keep going. Thank you very much. It is a lady at the back. Excuse me.
It's okay. My name is Shay Butler. I'm with the College of St. Rose in Albany, New York. Thank you for your presentation. My question for you is, well, one, an observation. I agree that programs like yours need to be scaled, and I've actually created a model that scales these programs at the state level for programs like yours and like the P-Tech program at IBM. Now, my question is, the German model, Germany has such a great structure of social support. How have you at Siemens dealt with issues of poverty that prevent persistence to students through your program? Have you dealt with those P through 16 issues that are poverty related?
Very good question. I'm just going to ask you to hold on the answer, because if possible, if we had another question, it would be nice to get it in just so we get as many questions in the time. Anybody else got a question? Yes, I've got a hand here at the front, a lady in blue. Definitely a lady. Thank you.
In our last, Cindy Love, ACPA in DC. In our last session at lunch, someone described one of the skills that was going to be required was the ability to look around the corner. And in the World Futures work, you know, they're talking about foresight being the most critical skill for the 21st century business. And So I'm just thinking within Siemens, who within your company is doing that work so that you don't find yourself behind? Because I think in universities and colleges, one of the struggles is we're not confident we know who's doing that work on our campuses. So I'd like to know how you're dealing with it there. Maybe there's a model for us.
That one, and then take the poverty-related question.
I'll answer that. A couple of things. One is, as a CEO of a large company and also as a general manager running businesses within the company, that's one of your most important challenges, is to be thinking about where the business is going, looking out at the market and things like that. So, for example, I speak a lot on college campuses, and a lot of our senior executives go out and speak and work at college campuses talking about what's going. I think we also take a lot of these ideas. We have a thing we call Picture of the Future. We actually have a book that comes out quarterly talking about the picture of the future and where we see the future going in a number of different areas. And we're in about 50 different businesses, so it covers a pretty broad range: healthcare, infrastructure, energy, manufacturing, et cetera. And so we take that out. Again, we work closely with our research partners, our universities, the national labs, and other things to put together the ideas about where we think things are going, and what are the different scenarios where they can go, and are we looking at the technology and things like that. I think that's a big challenge, though, I think, in the current environment, because it requires that you be pretty nimble. One of the things we've talked to a couple of universities about is saving some money aside, not to commit to all the formal programs, but leaving some money aside to say, we don't know exactly where this is going to go. How do we use that money? And in many cases, Siemens and other companies will partner with you in that area to do that. So you have to leave. We leave money. All the research and development we do, we spend about $6 billion a year around the world. About 20% of that is not dedicated to any one business. It's just left at corporate to say, we don't know we're not always right about where the world's going. Mm-hmm. We have to understand, take a look at what's happening and say, hey, we need to put more focus here because we see the world going. I think universities could benefit from doing the same thing and working more closely with companies to do that. On the program you're doing, scaling the program, and I think you asked a question about how does that include underprivileged?
Yes, basically, I suppose the sense of the question was you could actually have a lot of people who were not even at the kind of starting gates of this, who might well kind of profit from the kind of apprenticeships or the schemes that you describe. But what's your outreach there?
Yeah, we have a Siemens Foundation, and we have a number of programs. We have a big research, we have a big science and technology competition, one of the biggest in the country. But we spend a lot of money in K through 12, the junior ages, with science days. We do a lot with our local factories, things going out to schools. I know I do some of this in Washington, D.C. We do a lot of that at underprivileged schools. I think one of the questions you're asking, I think, is the most important. We've been looking at the Business Roundtable is how do you scale these? Every company is out there giving to local schools, underprivileged schools, et cetera, but we're not getting any bang for it. So at the BRT, we actually studied all the programs that companies were involved in and selected 5 that we thought were scalable along math and reading and a couple of other areas. And we're asking the BRT companies to put 10% of their spend, their giving to K through 12 on those programs so that we can scale them across the country and demonstrate that we can get results. And the big idea behind that was that you had to be able to show 3 years of measurable results by a third party. And the issue is there really weren't that many programs that companies were supporting that could really do that. Yes, and so that's why we've done that. But and a lot of those programs are going to be focused on underprivileged schools, kind of getting in at the elementary and middle school level.
Which also means being able to measure progress. I think that's something that's dogged some reforms in K to 12, and that possibly you could read across more and possibly work more across that divide. Anybody else? I'm looking into the empty quarter here. Yes, I've got a gentleman. Actually, no, I can see everyone at once. There's a gentleman over here, I think, first, and then we'll take you over there, madam.
Hi, Louis Soares, American Council on Education. So, I keep thinking about what the world looks like if the BRT actually scaled that much investment. What's unique about Siemens that you do what you do around the world? I mean, by yourself, you have scale.
Yeah.
Clearly, not every Fortune 100 company does what you do. So I'm wondering, what is it about the way that in a sustained way? I mean, you're a publicly traded company. Like, how is it that the Siemens board, keeps focused on this longer-term view of investment as opposed to, next quarter's stock price?
Right.
Because my intuition is that to get to scale, there are 6 million undergrads in community colleges, and others in credit-bearing courses, and other. To get to scale with that number would require a significant amount of corporate resources. And I'm wondering what the profile is of companies that end up getting us to scale.
Very interesting. Can we just take this lady's question as well? Double up in your last.
Maria Drago from Talent Management at the United Nations Development Program. Actually, this question is more as a U.S. citizen. I'm thinking about our workforce issues here in the U.S. The apprentice program that you have sounds fantastic. I'm wondering, do you also take in, either in that program or something similar, people who are maybe in their 30s, 40s, 50s, finding themselves out of work, but who would like, another chance in...
Yeah, okay, I'll take that one first and come back to this. Yes, we do. In fact, we're a couple of the programs we have here, we're changing it around a bit, not just to take high school kids. So one of the things we've done recently is we're taking veterans in. And actually, down in Charlotte, we now have several veterans in the program who've come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And in addition, we have training centers for the software that I mentioned around the country. We have 22. We've opened up all 22 training centers. Any empty seats in those centers are free for veterans. And there's actually 10 courses you can take over a number of months. So any veteran can take those free. And once you get certified on the software, there are 78,000 companies around the world that use that software. So once you get certified, it gets you, kind of gets you into the game. But we're also starting to look at some of the more mature workforce in some of the areas with the apprentice and bringing them in for the testing and things like that. And actually, interesting, a lot of people who have four-year degrees, and actually not people who've been out of school a long time, but we have a couple people in the program now who graduated from college 3, 4, 5 years ago who are coming back and doing the apprentice program because they see the skill development, they see a real job coming out of it, and they see a future career there. So yes, we are starting to adapt.
Just going to direct you to the other question because time is not on our side at the moment. If I could just that very interesting question here as well about how do you keep how do you get a board to kind of go along with this sustained effort?
Yeah, I think the thing about scaling this up globally, I've told our board about what I like to call the training gap in the U.S. And if you go out, there's a lot of studies done now, but companies, if you go back to 1980, did an average of about 100 hours per year training people. By 1995, it was like 10 to 15. And today, only 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 employees actually gets formal training in companies anymore. Companies want to hire people with experience, right? They don't want to. The Germans look at that, and when I go and present that, they say, why? Why aren't people investing in their talent? And why don't they have these training? Why don't they have apprentice? I mean, I think it's a little foreign to the company because, in Germany, we have a supervisory board with a works council, which is like labor unions here. And, they look out for the workers, and they also look out for the business. And so the two ideas are combined. You can't have a good business without a good workforce, and the workforce needs to be constantly trained to keep up with what's happening out there today. So these ideas of supporting apprentice programs and internships and various programs at universities and things is just the way Siemens does business around the world. So now, could you scale that? Absolutely, because when you talk to a lot of major companies, when I talk to CEOs here in the U.S. at the Business Roundtable, at the U.S. Chamber and other areas, they are spending a lot of money. They are giving a lot of money, spending a lot of money on programs. But I think to the point someone else made, we've got thousands of these little programs going on, but we're not picking 5 or 10 of them and say, let's scale those, right? So we've got lots of things going on, some of which work, some of which don't, some of which we don't know whether they work because we don't measure them enough. And therefore, we don't really know where we are. But we spend, in this country, we spend more per student or per workforce than just about any country in the world. So it's not an issue of dollars. It's getting them focused on the right programs, I think.